his orders, and he checks where they're at. With he can find his direction and time and the latitude he's at. And yeah, we have some gunpowder stored here. He has, whenever he has other officers over for a drink, we have our fancy drinking glasses.
Interesting.
A lot of decisions are done with a glass of rum or whiskey.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is nice because this table folds down, and he also has a bed behind the partition, and that folds down. And this is all set up for him by the soldiers.
Okay.
So this is kind of like the Hilton out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
You know? He can even install small wood burning stoves inside. So even in the winter time, it can be quite comfortable. So yeah, you'll see a little bit more elegance in here than you would at just the common triangle tents like we have out back.
We could have like a special carpeting like thing, or just
He'd
the
probably
grass.
have a ground cloth.
Ground
I
cloth.
don't think they'd take
Ground
carpeting
cloth.
because it would get wet and it would mold and
Yeah.
rot.
Oh, yeah.
So all
Yeah.
they had was
You're right.
the natural materials to build
Yeah, I
those
think
out.
most of the other tents do have a canvas floor.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Have you been around to see the other
Oh yeah,
Oh,
we've
yeah.
been looking at everything.
All right.
Cool. Very neat
This
stuff.
little gadget here is pretty neat because it's a compass, technically. You can see the compass down in there, pointing north. When you would orient this, what they call a gnomon, to north, the shadow would show you the time. So if you knew the time, you knew where your longitude was.
Yeah.
Then you would raise this and then match it with north, and you read on the side, it would tell your latitude.
Oh wow,
So
that's
you know
cool.
you're 40 degrees by 32 degrees.
Uh-huh.
So it's a non-battery powered GPS.
Yeah. Neat
It
stuff.
was fairly accurate, you know.
I'm going to go up to the loop on that.
So they just had some idea how far north they were going and how far west they were going. But it's just kind of neat. It does, you know, basically 3 different things. But you don't realize that time as you know, say it's 1 o'clock, it tells you how far you are from Greenwich in England.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So if you know that, you know how many degrees it is by calculating
That's
out.
very cool.
Because when you do the degrees, okay, you're at, say, 30 degrees, it'll be 30 degrees, 40 minutes, 29 seconds. So you exactly where you're at. And that's where they get the minutes and seconds, because the degrees are actually, if you mark it down, it's actually the hour.
Oh yeah.
So if you know what time, you just keep calculating over to that time lines up with 1 o'clock here, and you know exactly where you're at. And after a while, they got the sextants going, because about late 1750s, they started coming up with the sextants, where you could spot off moon, stars, and that. Because this thing doesn't work very good if the sun's not out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't get the shadow.
When they did so much surveying then later on.
Yeah, because when the sextant came out, they were using it a lot for a survey tool, which was like a laser transit nowadays, and you could really calculate just what points you were at. It was a lot closer. And that too, if it was cloudy, you're done again. You
Yeah.
can't spot
Yeah.
where you're at. But it was pretty. We call it old technology because some of the stuff it's so neat it works today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's so
exactly.
practical. Like people say, well, you know, we'll wear this in the summertime. Well, is it wool hot? Well, no, it's not, because if you sweat, wool wicks it away from you really quick. If it wicks away really quick, that means it'll hit the atmosphere and evaporate quick.
And cools you off.
Expansion causes coolness.
Exactly.
Now, in the wintertime, we wear exactly the same thing. People say, aren't you cold? Well, no, I'm wearing wool. Well, what does that do? It keeps the heat in. And if it gets wet, and the temperature's below, I think, 40 outside, the wool actually starts to make heat. So, the dumbest thing, if you're stuck in the woods and you're lost and you're in your wool, dive in the creek. You stand up, bring yourself off a little bit, and you'll actually start smoking. It'll start making heat. It's not like a really bad thing to do to get yourself wet when you're out in the woods. But if you're wearing all wool, they say it starts to make the heat then.
Yeah.
It's really strange. We've actually had some crash dummies test this for us. Put them in an outfit, get them wet, and after all, they're taking their clothes off. They're like, oh man, I'm just suffocating. And it makes that much heat. It's just really strange.
Yeah. Wow, you guys really have neat stuff here.
Thanks.
I think we have one tent over here shows you what basically an officer would have that was traveling. This would be like a command tent. This would be for a really high ranking officer. I'm a major, so I could have a tent like this. But a lot of tents that captains would have just basically a one-man tent. But if their wife was with them, she had to share the tent.
Oh.
And the only way a woman could be with us was she had to be married to somebody.
Yeah.
So for 100 men, you realize 6 women. and they had to be married to somebody in the company. So if her husband got shot, she had 10 days to grieve and then marry somebody else in the company, or else from here to send back to Philadelphia on her own.
Yeah.
If she didn't marry again.
Yeah.
So, and they all had to have a job. They had to be cooks, clothes washing. They all had something that they did.
Mm-hmm.
Some actually were like small sutlers. They would carry necessaries to the guy, like soap, things like that, needles, thread, and they would sell that. So that was, and if they were actually doing a job, the government paid them and gave them half rations too. On top of that, so it was a pretty good deal.
Mm. Mm. Those rifles are muskets or
Yep,
what?
muskets.
Yeah.
Those are all muskets there.
All smoothbore.
Yeah, this is a fowling piece, so this would have been a civilian hunting weapon that they would also use whenever they joined in the militia. You could tell it's not a military weapon because it's stocked to the muzzle.
Uh-huh.
You can't put a bayonet on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where all the military ones,
You're able to.
you're able to put a bayonet on.
Uh-huh.
And that's where when somebody points to the front of a gun, there's something out there. They call it a sight.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's SIGHT nowadays. Back then it was SITE. It
Mhm.
was the sight of bayonet attachment.
Yeah.
They never thought about aiming with the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then it being like a bead on a shotgun where you would just line up, because the barrel's so long, you'd line up that sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could aim with it. But when they first started using it, they didn't aim. They just said point that way, and everybody just got boom, and then load again.
Yeah.
They didn't bother aiming. But when they got into the French Indian War, marksmanship was really stressed. And
Yeah.
if you got good enough with your musket at shooting what they called mark, you could qualify to get a rifle. Because there were 6 riflemen in the 100-man company too. And what they used those guys for is they would stay either in the flanks or behind the unit, because they could shoot 300 yards. And these guys could shoot maybe 100 yards. So you could shoot over top of the formation and keep the enemy down until
Yeah.
these guys could form up.
And less likely to get picked off in the
Yeah, and the
meat.
other thing is they were so accurate and had such good range. These 6 guys were also the hunters for the company. Because once you left, I think Carlisle was the last supply station until you got you got here. There's nothing between there and here. So you had so many rations for so many days, but then you had to hunt for yourself.
Yeah.
So they had these 6 guys to hunt to go out and get deer, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back then they had elk,
Yeah.
moose.
Moose.
There were even bison in
There were
Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
bison when you got out this
I
far in the
remember reading
flatlands.
about that.
Yeah. So those guys would hunt for the company. And I had to laugh because I read one notation about them hunting, and the guy was writing back, and he evidently, most of the people who wrote back were more ranking people who had more education. He wrote back, he says, the only problem with obtaining deer in this country is deciding which one to shoot that's the proper size for your need.
Mm.
They wouldn't shoot a giant deer if there's only like 5 guys. They try and find a
Yeah.
smaller deer and shoot.
Yeah.
So it's
So
like
they
the
weren't
Sam's
wasteful.
Club of deer, you know,
Yeah,
you
so
don't
they
want
weren't
to get the bulk
wasteful.
package.
Well, people say, that's horrible, it's horrible. I said, Mother Nature's Ziploc bag. It runs, all your meat runs around fresh, and you knock it
Yeah.
down and cook it.
Yeah.
No storage necessary.
Yeah, we
But-
know that.
So they were organized, because mostly you weren't fighting, you were mostly traveling and trying to find something to eat. That was most of your priority.
Mhm.
It's one of those things that's, 24 hours of boredom punctuated by 1 minute of terror.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so nothing ever changes. But it was just kind of neat the way they had things arranged where they actually drew riflemen in. People have the idea they didn't have rifles because it's not on the official sheet. They weren't supplied by the Army.
Yeah.
What they would do is an officer might get so many funds, he would go buy one, or they would borrow them.
Mhm.
But they were allowed to have 6 of them. And most of the officers did carry rifles because officers had to buy every single thing themselves.
Mhm.
They had to buy their own shoes, their own tents, their own guns, their own everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they could pretty much pick and choose what they really needed. These are unusual brown besses from the other ones you've probably seen. They're actually smaller.
Uh-huh.
They're only 7/8 the size of a brown bess because a brown bess is 42-inch barrel for over here. Over in Europe, they're 46-inch barrels, which is like this. Ours are only 37 inches. And this is an earlier model. This is a 1750s model.
Those are obviously rebuilt, like
Yeah, these are replicas.
Replicas, yeah.
Yeah, because you will want to fire all.
Are they accurate in terms of the weight and all of that?
Oh yeah.
Let me just.
Yeah, they're absolutely.
Oh, wow, these things are heavy.
Yeah, they're about 9 pounds. They're about 9 pounds.
Okay.
And
Cool.
a standard Bess, if you look at the bore, you can see this is a little bit smaller. These are a 16 gauge
Uh-huh.
shotgun type thing, because they did it by balls of a pound early caliber. So
Uh-huh.
it's 66 caliber. Now, regular brown bass is actually 11 gauge.